Welcome to the Architect of Resilience podcast, where we explore the secrets of overcoming life's challenges and unlocking unstoppable strength through deep personal conversations and expert insights.
Another episode of the Architect of Resilience podcast, and I am super excited. Today, I've got Kris Gethin on, a world-renowned hybrid athlete, elite performance coach, best-selling author, biohacker, and sought-after speaker in the field of health optimization. As a drug-free professional bodybuilder, Ironman triathlete, ultramarathon runner, Spartan competitor, Kris has redefined what it means to be a multidimensional in fitness and resilience. He is the founder of the DPT training method, former editor-in-chief of bodybuilding.com, whose programs have transformed millions of lives globally. Beyond aesthetics, Kris focuses on the intersection of discipline, mindset, and longevity, leveraging cutting-edge protocols in fitness, recovery, and anti-aging. He's a prolific content creator, host of the Kris Gethin podcast, where he challenges conventional limits of the human body and psyche. Living by the ethos and discipline outlasts motivation. Also the founder of Unmatched supplements, which we will probably get into as well. So that's a nice glowing, introduction.
It's a long one.
But I like to do self-introductions. Like, let's strip away like all the accomplishments, all the stuff that I just mentioned. Like, who is Kris at his core? What are the drivers? What are your values? How do you define yourself?
Good question. So I guess they've evolved over the years. It's changed over the years. So this weird accent that I've got is from Wales. I grew up on a farm in Wales. Left there half of my life ago, like 25 years ago, and growing up on a farm, I created, I guess, some discipline in regards to like going to bed early, had to wake up early and work on a farm before school. So I created a very good work ethic. Definitely wasn't probably the smartest ethic, but there was a work ethic there. I just had to kind of figure out the smarter aspect after. But to me now, I think back then I couldn't wait to get out of Wales. The first half of my life was just racing motocross. That's what I did. And when I gave up motocross, I kind of lost my identity for a little while. But then when I actually found the fitness industry through accident from all the injuries that I'd gained out of motocross, I realized, wow, if I actually wake up in the morning and work out, I have better cognitive function. If I start eating foods that are better for me, then I feel better about myself. I have more clarity. I've got better memory recall. This is something that I'm going to employ and maybe go to college and study this and maybe teach it. And that's kind of, where my life definitely took a turn for the best, because I was kind of lost until then. And I have never really, you mentioned like the accomplishments, and I was thinking, wow, that kind of needs to be cut down. I never had a goal of accomplishing anything. I lived the day for that day, and however I lived it dictated tomorrow. So when a lot of people will come to me and say, hey, how can I do this and how can I do that, and what you've done in the industry, I really don't have an answer for them, as opposed to living in the present. And much like, you go to the gym, you can either screw around and talk to everyone and be on your phone, or you can be intense with your workout and have a quality workout that relates to better results. And it's the same with your life. I feel the more that you focus on whatever outcome that you're trying to achieve by the end of the day, then 2 years from now, you don't know what you've kind of accomplished. And it's the same with the physique. And I kind of relate that to the analogy in life, really. It's whatever you put in is what you're going to get out at the end of the day. And you've just got to figure out what those strengths are. If bodybuilding isn't your strength, then you move on to another form of physical activity. And it's the same in your life, career, relationship.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone else that has entered the space from motocross. So that's really interesting just in itself. But being in the moment, I think, is, as you're noting, is highly valuable and might relate to the question that I wanted to dive into, which is, on the outset, it looks like you're someone that lives life on the extremes. Like you've done these things that are what would be considered, polar opposites between, stepping on that bodybuilding stage to being an endurance athlete. So, maybe my take is wrong on, living on the extremes, but what drive has driven you to kind of merge sometimes these polar opposites?
Sometimes it's a bit of a dare. I hate it when people say, oh, you can't do something. And I think it's because maybe I've got a little bit of scarring or PTSD from school because I sucked at school. I hated it. And I felt very frustrated because I was told that I was stupid. You can't do this. It's just, you're kind of special, but you're not special. And I think to a certain degree, when people would say something, oh, there's no way that you can do that because of this, I'm like, yeah, I'll suck at it. Sign me up. Because I want to see and challenge that kind of norm, because I think a lot of us live under very, very short ceilings. So you know what it's like being in this industry. People would point at you and say, like I remember after my very first bodybuilding show, I'd only been weight training for a year and a half. Straight after that show, oh, this guy's on steroids. That's basically what it was. And of course, that's kind of got worse over the years as I've got bigger or as I did get bigger. And then, being exposed to social platforms, et cetera, et cetera. And I think people just live under very short ceilings. They don't allow themselves the opportunity to grow from a spiritual, physical, mental aspect. And I think when you challenge the norm and you actually go out there and do these things, then all of a sudden you see other people doing it. And all you've done is just created an opportunity. You've created a different foresight and perspective. So there was a couple of reasons. Number one, I wanted to challenge their norms, tell me I'm going to suck at it, I'm going to do it. And then number two, kind of open that avenue of thought for other people, because the amount of people that I had as clients that said, hey, I used to love doing marathons or swimming or whatever, but I gave it up because I really want to pursue bodybuilding. Now, maybe it's not competitive bodybuilding, but they still want to build a physique. Well, there's no reason why you cannot do both. You just need to focus on your recovery, maybe bring down the frequency or the volume of your workouts. And maybe you're going to have to eat a shitload more than you generally used to. And there's a way of supplementing through it as well. So I think it was a bit of that, because nothing gives me more pleasure than being, say, at the Mr. Olympia at the Expo and someone coming up to me with their half Ironman or marathon trophy or medal and say, hey, I did it because you put it out there online. So, there's a couple of reasons. And then you kind of get plugged into a different social community, and then you realize where the addiction comes from, that addictive nature, that high. And you're like, oh, wow, I'm getting sucked into this now as well. And then you have another opportunity. It just makes you a better person and a better trainer. And of course, it can be healthy, but it can be really bad as well. When I first started doing it, my testosterone started tanking. And then I realized, okay, I've got that mentality where I'll just overtrain and deal with the consequences after. So then you pull it back. It's much like, if you're working with high achievers, you're generally not trying to get them to do more. You're trying to kind of get them to do less.
So how does that relate? So you mentioned in there kind of growing, spiritually, emotionally as well. Did anything in that process of, switching to those different identities, those different platforms, or challenging yourself to those extremes help facilitate growth in those arenas as well?
Yeah, 100%. Because one of the things I was told when I was a kid is that, Kris is easily distracted and he daydreams a lot, which I would. I didn't want to be at school. I wanted to be home, on the farm on my motorbike. And I found out that I was able to use those quote unquote weaknesses as my weapons. So I could go into a swimming pool and stare at that black line for an hour. No worries. Easy. I can daydream doing that. So that actually helped me. And, going out on a 100-mile bike ride on a Sunday, sure. No headphones, nothing. So that kind of daydreaming aspect, I found that they weren't necessarily weaknesses as we were told as kids, and that could have been a burden or scarring for us. It is actually possibly a strength. You've just got to recognize them, and sometimes you need to put yourself into these positions to recognize them. A lot of us are distracted. We've got the phone, we're on podcasts, we're emailing, we've got deadlines, we're on phone calls. So we never really have the opportunity to understand where our strengths and weaknesses lie. But when you're out on that road or swimming, and you don't have the distraction of the phone or music, you only have your thoughts. And sometimes you realize so much more when you get to think a little bit more as opposed to get distracted. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of strengths there. And I found that I felt better, because you're out in nature, you're not on a Stairmaster, and just getting out in the sun and being, listening to the birds, whatever, it just made me feel better. A lot of time people will look to, going on medicinal journeys, go to Costa Rica or whatever, go and do ayahuasca. Well, sometimes it's just in your backyard.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just like you said, spending time with your thoughts. Because a lot of times I also see people use a number of, going to the gym or the other things to distract ourselves or to be away from that. And I think a key lesson that I'm hearing there is being able to just spend time with your thoughts. Sometimes that can be uncomfortable, being in that space where you've got nothing to be but in your head, but incredibly valuable.
Oh man, it's the hardest thing ever. Like I did a 10-day Vipassana. I don't know if you're familiar with them, where basically it's a silent retreat for 10 days and you're meditating from early in the morning until evening. You're not allowed your phone. You can't take anything in there to read. You're not allowed to make eye contacts. You cannot vocalize anything. It's tough. A majority of people are leaving on day 3, day 4. Because now you're alone with your thoughts, and that can be scary. It can bring up a lot of stuff from the past. You could become very emotional, and a lot of people don't want to face it. They want to be distracted from it. So it can be very, very tough. But I think it's something that needs to be done, because then when you do come back to the real world and you hear the noise and you see the lights inside the gas station or whatever it is, you realize just how overstimulated that we are. And you need to kind of break away from that and sometimes bookend your day, for instance, a couple of hours away from your phone and TV and whatnot, and the same in the morning, as opposed to starting off in a reactory state. You should be in a positive exploration state.
Yeah, that's great. That sounds like a pretty intense experience. I'm just reflecting on returning to kind of my upbringing in the wilderness. I went and spent a number of years ago a week out in the desert with my mom on our mine. This is before she passed, obviously. And there's just no one anywhere, and it's just, we're mining rocks. And it was a good 7-hour drive back home to get back home. And you started getting closer and there's people on the roads, and then you're in a town and you got to pull up and get gas. And it's just like, well, it was just this weird transition that kept building. And I'm like, it's too much.
And I bet on the way there, you probably didn't notice much, like the
Nope.
shape of the clouds or the silhouette of the skyline, but you would notice a lot more of it on the way back.
Yeah. So let's step another direction away from, being, with yourself, being with your thoughts, but in the environment of people chasing maybe these extremes or these things of opposites, or just the chaotic environment that, I know probably a lot of your clients, and I know mine, high performers, are often in. How do you help them with the mindset shift to maintain discipline in those types of environments?
Yeah, it all depends. Sometimes it depends on where they are, location, whether in a city or country, how overstimulated they are. Are they releasing enough oxytocin, serotonin, or is it just dopamine? And then, stress hormones, because people become addicted to that. And then, obviously, a lot of the people that come to me are extremists. So the first thing they'll ask is what supplements can I take and take double the amount? And what peptides can I take now? There's all these nootropics. You've got the dihexa, you've got the J147. I want to double the dose. And then obviously not realizing, hey, there is a crash. There is a downside to this if you abuse it. And it's a lot of the time it is getting them to do less. It's hey, let's just focus on sleep first. I'm not even going to give you a training program or nutrition program. Your sleep sucks, bro. Let's focus on that. Okay, next thing, we're going to focus on putting the phone down. Next thing, we're going to focus on earthing, grounding, all the hippie woo-woo shit, get out in the sun.
Yep.
Then we're going to focus. Now you've got a good mental state. You haven't got the brain fatigue. You're going to make better decisions, and you're going to be more enthusiastic and motivated to work on your discipline now. And then we'll start working on the hard shit in the morning. Even though ice baths are trendy and all that sort of stuff, there is a lot of value in it, especially at the beginning of the day, toning your vagal nerve. So you've got more mental stability, got better blood sugar stability by getting in the ice bath, and you're doing hard shit. You're getting used to getting discipline in first thing in the morning, especially when it's dark outside. So now you're doing something you don't want to do, but it's good for you. It's a small sacrifice to make for the long-term success. So, and getting up at a certain time, I don't give a shit what time you go to bed. That's your problem. But you got to get up at this time, because now the following night you will go to bed earlier because so bloody knackered now. So it's kind of getting into the routines to begin with and changing the neuro structure, because they've created all these bad habits over so many years that you just have to realign and refocus and retrain the brain, and the body starts to follow. Like I just told you, I'm just in a process of moving house. But the amount of times I've come home, like from the gym, and I drive to my old house instead of here, I'm like, man, it's just those neuro pathways are just ingrained. So you just need to kind of change those pathways from the bad habits to the good habits. And it takes time. Some people longer than others. Some people want it more than others, so everybody's treated differently accordingly.
Yeah. I love that. So many people do like reach out wanting to know, what is the peptides, the supplementation, all of this to optimize my health. And it's like, you got to start with like, the world provides first, like get your light exposure, touch the ground, eat natural foods that are in season, get exposure to cold. Like, are you doing these things? Because if we live a life doing all those things, you don't need those other interventions necessarily.
Yeah, they have a time and place. Of course, we both know how amazing peptides can be in a time and place. Are they hormonally optimized to even consider doing this first? If they are, sure, maybe you'll have a major benefit. And it can, there's certain peptides that can help rewire the brain to a certain degree as well. So they all have a time and place. But the problem is, much like when you go to these biohacking events, these people have indisposable income. They're not even following a training or nutrition program. They're not even thinking about getting outside in sun. They want the red light therapy. They want the earthing mat so they don't have to take their shoes and socks off and then spend thousands on hyperbaric oxygen machine or molecular hydrogen, not willing to put in the work. And they're libidoless, they have no energy, but they think that they can buy it. Yeah. Now, you got to do the hard shit. You have to apply yourself first before purchasing the shiny objects.
The number one intervention for longevity in the world, strength training. And the people that skip that and try to buy all these other things is just, it's like, really?
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to buy muscle density so you're more metabolically flexible. You're not going to buy bone density as well just by sitting on your ass or being on a vibration plate.
I love it. So I'm thinking about just as we're talking about this, like the big shift that we're seeing in the industry, at least I'm seeing, and I think you noted actually just before I hit record, where a lot of the focus in the last 10, 20 years has been, on this aesthetics, this bodybuilding, this, type of pathway. And we are seeing a lot more shift, at least that's my perception, towards cellular health, longevity, the quality of life exposures. Are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, for sure. But, it all depends what extremist that you're looking at. For the mainstream, yes, it's definitely happening. Bodybuilding, no, not so much. That's what I try to teach. And, I'll be speaking at the Olympia University. I know Jay's going to be there as well. And, the hope is that you're going to get people there that are going to kind of listen. And, we know that peptides are kind of working their way into the bodybuilding world, hopefully in a good way and not a bad way. And if a lot of these bodybuilders or high-performing athletes want a longer career, then they have to apply these principles. I love hardcore bodybuilding. I used to work for Flex magazine and Muscle and Fitness back in the day, know all the, the top bodybuilders. I love that world. Do I want to do that myself? No. But I want to go to watch a freak show. Even though I always competed in drug-free bodybuilding, I'd never go to a natural bodybuilding show. That shit's boring to me. I want to see something that's crazy, that's freaky, that's unattainable. But I don't want to see people lose their life or put their health in jeopardy because of it, and we've seen that over the years. But now we're seeing younger populations investing in their health span more, as opposed to picking up the energy drink and punching back. You still have a shitload of those people, but we're seeing the trends of these like coffee mornings now. These people, these groups get together. There'll be a DJ, there'll be an ice bath, contrast therapy. People are having a party because they want to get to meet like-minded people in their space, as opposed to going to the pub and meeting them on a Friday, Saturday night. So it is changing. The trend is changing. It's just going to take time. That's all. And all we can do now, we've got platforms such as podcasts. People know this is where they get their real news now that isn't filtered. More and more hopefully going to get exposed to it. But I do definitely see things going in that direction. We're seeing more quantification, these wearables. So that creates more accountability to the consumer. If they're looking at their CGM readings or their Whoop readings or whatever it may be, it's like, oh, okay, I'm doing right. Oh shit, I better go to bed early tonight because that Whoop or my Oura ring is going to tell me my sleep sucks and I don't want that. So it does help.
Yeah. Well, how do your approaches differ between the training, diet, supplementation, between aesthetics and longevity?
So, for instance, if that person is focusing a little bit more longevity, I'm not going to get them to train to absolute failure on every single set. It's not going to be insane balls to the wall training. I'm not necessarily going to have them eating six meals every single day. There's going to be a little bit of fasting intertwined in there. We're going to focus a little bit more on their AMPK pathways in combination with their mTOR. It's not going to be overstimulated with mTOR, so a shitload of food, a shitload of anabolism there, I guess. So it's a kind of a different concept. There is a little going to be more quantification. Maybe I'm going to get that person to do a biological age test. That could be through telomeres. It could be glycan, could be through methylation. And then we'll quantify, are we able to reverse that biological age? But there are a lot of crossovers. So we know cortisol is a very catabolic hormone. So if you've got a high performer that's a bodybuilder or whatever it may be, you need them to be anabolic as much as possible. So there are going to be similar traits where you're going to focus on meditation. You're going to focus on slowing down when you're eating your meals without distraction to be in that parasympathetic dominant state, as opposed to being sympathetic dominant all the time, because you're really trying to absorb the nutrients that you're eating and keeping that stress hormone at bay. So there are kind of crossovers there, but I'd say more so it is the training aspect and the frequency of the food as well. The meals, just that there is no requirement. If they're not training to absolute failure and trying to be anabolic and feed those muscles as much, then of course they don't need to eat as much or eat as frequently. But I still want to make sure that they do have good insulin sensitivity at the same time.
Yeah. I want to dive a little bit into peptides, biohacking. I find it, 10, 15 years ago, I might have been, helping a high level strength athlete or bodybuilder with, prepping and getting, the most potential heading into a show or an event, while mitigating, which is what I was known for, mitigating the side effects as best as possible, right? How to do that as safely as possible. But what I find fascinating about peptides, sure, you can't add the level of muscle that you're going to add with anabolics, but we're able to help people, get leaner, add muscle mass, while at the same time actually moving backwards on the damage that they may have done with these, like actually improving health while enhancing performance. So not just like, how do we enhance performance with mitigating the side effects, but like, that's the fascinating thing about peptides is we can enhance performance while improving. And I know that you have some similar approaches or thought processes. What are some of similar methodologies that you would use and employ as far as protocols in that space?
Yeah, of course. Good question. So, I'm just thinking of this client that I have in India right now. A lot of personal trainers will actually get their clients taking anabolics because a lot of the time that's the only way that personal trainer makes money, because they don't make as much through supplements unless it's like black market. It just is what it is. It's just the fat of the land. So a lot of the time you're trying to fix those issues. And, this particular client obviously wanted to get off, or he got off and his testosterone's really low. So now, obviously go on to a TRT dose and then maybe like an enclompafene, for instance. But now looking at peptides like testosterone or kisspeptin 10, or maybe a combination of both, higher fat diet to ensure that we are stimulating the hormone, progesterone, vitamin D, creatine, again, those precursors to testosterone, to try to slowly fix the damage that was done from the anabolics, you know. But a lot of these people are getting obviously great responses from these peptides. Of course, you know, like a secretagogue is not going to be like a synthetic, especially like a HGH, especially if that person's getting a little bit older. But they have profound effects of these people that do have these metabolic deficiencies. And you're seeing people get leaner. You're seeing people take like your testosterone, for instance, and spot reducing around the midline where they have very high estrogen levels or cortisol. So I think it's absolutely profound that you can fix so much with these peptides, even though they should be hormonally optimized and they should be in a healthy state and they should be following an adequate sleep, diet, training, nutritional protocol. There's a lot of damage that can be undone. And then if we're looking at the biohacks, you know, of course, we've got the, you know, the red light, for instance, that can further help with the testosterone production on a much lower degree. But it's like, it's these little tiny things that all add up, you know. And I always tell people, you know, if you are trying to get to an island, you know, in this big ship, and you have to set the course, you have to be so accurate, because by the time you get to that island, that's 300 miles away, you could be way off. So it's these little tiny biohacks that you add in there that go into bed, and maybe it's the red light, maybe it's the peptide, maybe it's the higher fat diet, that will all contribute to the factor that we're trying to heal and target at the end of the day. So, you know, of course, there's a laundry list of certain biohacks, if you want to put it that way, that we can implement. It's just all dependent on that person. You know, are they exposed to a shitload of artificial light at night and they can't avoid it? Okay, then I guess you're going to have to wear the red lens blue light blocking glasses. You know, it is what it is. And we have these photoreceptors on our skin. So maybe you have to wear pajamas in the evening. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think is, you know, fundamental that someone should be taking care of to ensure they're going to get the most out of peptide interventions before moving forward with those?
Good question. I'd say just to ensure that, you know, get the blood work done, make sure that you're hormonally optimized, you know, make sure that you don't have anything that could have a negative effect. You know, much like, you know, people shouldn't necessarily take high doses of NAD or have stem cells if they have, you know, cancer in their family, that runs in a family, you know, same with HGH, you know. So I guess, you know, I always like to say, let's test and not guess. So that's the one thing I always tell people to do. Let's get the blood work done. You can get a DNA and just test if you like, but the blood work is essential because, you know, you're not going to run that engine to the ground if you don't know what's wrong with it, if you don't know what you can fix it, if you don't know if it needs fuel. You have to go through and have a full diagnosis first before implementing what needs to be fixed.
Let's dive into the world of optimizing your overall health. Pushing my physical limits, I encountered significant reductions in my health, and I reached out to Merrick Health as the premier telehealth service. I loved their personalized health coaching from the comfort of my home. They empower you with the choice of self-service diagnostic labs, or what I chose, the guided optimization with expert interpretations of blood work, health coaching, and with medications delivered to my door. Merrick Health is your partner in optimizing your health. Listeners can seize a fantastic 10% discount off their first blood work with code RESILIENCE at merrickhealth.com. That's code RESILIENCE for 10% off. Yeah, I'll repeat that on the NAD Plus. I think I just did a video recently around this, but it's so many people want to jump to that, like, oh, it's going to improve my cognition and my energy. But if you've got poor cellular health, like the poor metabolic flexibility of the cells, like the most hungry cells are going to be those senolytic cells, and you're literally feeding the cells that need to be dying off. They're going to be sucking up all that NAD, and you're doing literally the opposite of what you want to have happen. Like, yeah. Instead, maybe we feed the, you know, the systems that feed our natural level of NAD, right? You know, making sure that we've got good cellular health. Well, I'm speaking. How about I turn that into a question? What role do you think cellular health plays in long-term athletic performance?
Well, I think it's going to definitely extend that person's performance. I don't know if it would have a particular, it all depends on the age of the individual, because some people, when they're younger, they can just get away with it. You know, they could eat crap, they could be inflamed, but they're just amazing athletes and they get away with it. But, you know, you're looking at people, for instance, like the famous soccer player, Ronaldo, you know, playing in his 40s, and he's doing things that other professional athletes can't do in their 20s. And I think it's because he's got amazing cellular health. He's getting rid of those senescent cells, or those zombie-like cells, through various means, whether it be biohacks, autophagy, fasting, whatever it may be. But I think more of anything, it's going to extend people's careers, and we're seeing that people are getting better as they get older. Some people obviously have the genetics, and some people just have to work with it. And I think when you combine both of them, then you've got a real treat in store. But it's very, very important. It's all dependent on the individual. I got diagnosed with mold toxicity in 2014. And what I found when I realized, what was, where there was mold, and I started going towards like grass-fed, humane raised, and really focusing on my cellular health and removing myself of a lot of the senescence. I hadn't fasted up until that point. I realized that a lot of the inflammation that I had in my joints, in my knees, because I used to train heavy duty back in the day, trained with Dorian many, many times. And I thought it was just a byproduct of working out. This is what I'm going to deal with. I need to train around it, maybe a little bit more intensity, more volume, less rest periods, and I'll be okay. When I went through this kind of quote unquote detoxification process, I stayed at Dr. Spanaug's clinic for 6 weeks and then kind of continued on my own path. That's when I realized, wow, I've got my brain health back because now I'm more cognitively sharp. I don't have the inflammation in my joints that I thought was a byproduct of working out. Okay, this is what extension of health is all about. And that's what kind of took me down that path. And the weird thing is, I feel now I'm 51 next month. I feel better now than what I did 10, 15 years ago. I honestly do. I feel like I've got synovial fluid in my joints for once. And it's not, I don't have to wait till the afternoon or 5 warm-up sets after to get it there. So, all that to be said, I think it provides more of an extension as opposed to a quick fix. Much like if you go through oxidative stress, maybe you're not going to feel it for the first couple of years, but it'll be waiting for you 10, 15 years later. And I think it just takes time as well to ensure that cellular health is there for the future as opposed to oxidative stress.
Yeah. Great. I love that. What, while we're on the topic of peptides, what are your most underrated and overrated peptides?
So, and again, everyone's different here. Like I did my first peptide stack in 2017 because, I love my extreme sports. I love the downhill mountain biking. I love snowboarding. I'm not going to give that up. Luckily, I can lean upon stem cells and peptides to go, I'm going back out again next year. I just had shoulder surgery. And I remember reaching out to Nick Andrews and Jay Campbell, and just before the shoulder surgery, actually. And they said, get on the quote unquote Wolverine stack. And that was the BPC, the TB, that I think the GHK was in there as well. But what I found after the fact is that BPC works so much better than those other two compounds. But then I just had a friend tell me the other day that GHK worked really well on their knee. So I think it's very different because I would say, well, GHK is overrated. It's good for your skin, good for your soft tissue, etc., as opposed to like your injury sites. But I think everybody's different. I wouldn't touch the TB500. I wouldn't touch the GHKCU for those reasons. I'd just go for the BPC 157. So for me personally, those two are more overrated, specifically for that targeted injury or whatever it may be. I'd say, I really like, for cognitive function, I really like the dihexa, and I really like the J147 in combination. I really like I always get these mixed up, CMAX for times of anxiety. I get a lot of energy, and sometimes that could be anxious energy. So I'll have a little bit of C-Max to kind of slow that down just through a nasal spray, and it seems to work. Whether that's a placebo effect, it's working on me. So those are really, really good. Now, when it comes, see, again, this is another one, like, even though it isn't really a peptide, is thrown in amongst the peptides all the time, is tesofensin. Now, that is like coke for some people, like an amphetamine. It'll just keep them up for days, where you'd have, and that would be like on 250 mcg, where someone will take 500 mcg, won't touch the sides. So it's very different for different people. And I know I was speaking to Natalie at the Peptide Congress in Vegas a few weeks ago, and she was saying, yes, she cannot take a lot of these peptides for her melasma. She can't take the melanotan. She can't take any skin peptides because she'll come out in a rash. And these peptides are specifically for your skin. So it's so different, where some person could say, that's overrated, it doesn't work, it's terrible, where it really is healing for others, and I think that's why it's important that a lot of these people do have guidance when they are taking these kind of research peptides.
I was just going to say that exactly. Someone that understands the pathways and can look at both your personal goals, your blood work, all those things, and really help dial in a plan, because it's very, very a confusing sea when you just look at the research, what people are saying. And so absolutely highly recommend finding somebody that's spent some time with these things and understands them.
Yeah, it's a wild, wild west out there. You go online and you're going to get so many people's opinions. And of course, they're going to contradict each other somewhere along the line.
Yep. Just like you hear people, promoting methylene blue all over the place. Myself, not a fan of it because of the impact on nitric oxide, and then the impact that's going to have on all your endothelial tissue, which is absolutely massive for brain, heart, vascular tissue. Not saying that a small amount's not good, but like, why are you, post-COVID, mold toxicity, some other thing, they're like, yeah, there's times for that. I'm not saying never use it. And again, you might completely disagree with me on this, but
I don't disagree. I just think people are just taking way too high a dose.
Yes.
Way too high. You don't have to take it every single day. You can just take it every now and again. And you can even combine it with like molecular hydrogen, for instance, that creates even more efficacy. You could actually remove an electron, so you could have like a leuco blue instead of a methylene blue, and take even a lower dose. Yeah. But people think, if I double the dose, it'll be better, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we're sitting here talking about extremes. Both of us have done things on the extreme side in the course of our life. We probably have some listeners that are just like that, and that's exactly what they do, right? More is better.
Yeah.
So, speaking, actually, I'll move into that topic a little bit later. We'll go ahead and go there now. So, you recently came out with Unmatched subs. So really cool to see that line drop. And yeah, tell me about what your kind of goal and objective with that product line, and how do you see that evolving over time?
So I wanted to put something out there that kind of met the longevity, like you call it biohacking or whatever you want, the longevity sector with the performance sector, because we're all in this to improve our health and fitness, right? Well, a lot of the supplements, as you know, you look at them, it's like, how is this contributing to my health? It's actually contradicting the contribution. It's actually harming me. But hey, if it makes me feel good, if it's stimulating me, if it's having that placebo effect or giving me this this like fake form of energy requirement that is needed to go to the gym, people should kind of question why they're going to the gym in the first place. You don't need some extracurricular aspect to promote that. But a lot of the products, I felt that, we're bodybuilders or athletes at the end of the day, we're going to do everything. So we're going to take the pre-workout. We're going to take the intra-workout. We're going to take the post-workout. We're going to drink the EAAs and the hydration throughout the day. So there could be a lot of toxicity there by the end of the day, especially when you look at all the artificial sweeteners that's in there, and people are having an energy drink and you're having all the caffeine and the coffee on top of that, leading to adrenal fatigue. I just thought it was just is too much, especially here in the US where people love their energy drinks as well. And they don't want a dose of 180 caffeine. They want 350 in their pre-workout. So I wanted to come out with something that had, like paraxanthine, for instance, that metabolite of caffeine that doesn't have the downsides of the cortisol, the diuretic, the blood constriction, etc. And I wanted to ensure that everything was like naturally sweetened. Number one, but tasting good as well, because I know that a lot of the naturally sweetened products out there taste pretty bad and have some longevity aspects to it. So, with our EAAs, we do have like glutathione, cetriaglutathione in there, youth spermidine, things like that. Same with our multi-pack that is coming out soon. It's got a nootropic, a brain protective formula. It's got kidney, it's got heart, it's got liver in there, but it also has good gut, prebiotics, probiotics, digestive enzymes, dependent on that person, of course, that, they should take it or not. A joint formula. It's got like a omega, kind of like the old school animal pack, but a much cleaner, healthier version with methylated vitamins and minerals. Things like that is kind of what we wanted to achieve with this brand. And, we've done it, fortunately, where people have noticed that when they do get themselves off a lot of the artificial sweeteners, they may not notice it when they were on them at the time. But now we are getting more and more people say, hey, my digestion's better, my waist is tighter, I feel I'm able to stay a little bit leaner now by following the same protocol. So, obviously that speaks volumes to us. We could put it out there. We could look at scientific literature, but when we actually see it in the real world, we kind of follow that path. So again, how I said earlier, I'll live my day and that's how I will dictate the tomorrow. That's kind of what we're doing with the supplements as well. Just listening to people's feedback and kind of feeding what needs to be nourished to a certain degree. So that's what we've kind of done with the brand. And of course, we have the pre-workouts, we have the grass-fed whey isolate, all of those things. But now we are kind of leaning a little bit more into the longevity sector. We've got, the dileucine peptide. Obviously, it's not like your classic peptides, but, leaning into those sort of formulas where people are noticing, hey, I'm not as sore after my leg workouts as I usually am. Maybe people hate that. I don't know. But that's what we're kind of leaning into with the brand. And it's going phenomenal in DTC. But when you have it on the shelves of like a vitamin shop, then it requires a lot more education than saying, hey, go pick up that Ghost or that Optimum Nutrition or whatever. That's a little bit more of a simple sell. This is very complicated and I'm not blaming the people behind the counter, but a lot of them just don't know. They don't know what paraxanthine is. So it's a harder sell on a retail shelf, but it's very, very good in, online.
Yeah. What is your strategies around that when you have a product that takes a significant amount of education around the product?
That's a good question. I really wish I knew the answer, because sometimes I love working with Vitamin Shop, for instance. I've been on their wellness council for like 9 years now. But when you've got that many stores, like 750 stores, and that many employees, and you've got a revolving door of those employees, it's really difficult. Because you put out the information and you hope that they listen to apply. Are they enthusiastic? I don't know. But then once you've put out that education, now you've got to probably repeat yourself a month later because now of the turnover of staff. So it's very, very difficult. The only thing that we can do is continue to spread our ambassador program so we get more people to sign up, so we can get more people to go and do in-person sampling sessions, education sessions and stuff like that, because, there's just not enough of us to actually go and hit a lot of those retail stores. But, to that point, my business partner, Doug Miller, he has supplement stores. He's got like 13 stores. And then there's other stores that are more in the kind of niche bodybuilding market sector. Those people behind the counter, they're very enthusiastic. They work out. They're bodybuilders. They're more educated, and it's not as hard of a sell. The one thing that we did notice further than that, though, from a vanity perspective, having a 2-pound tub of isolate that is filled to the brim, stood next to other tubs that are 2 pounds as well, but they're half full, but the tubs are much bigger. The perception is people are looking at the size and value and going, holy shit, that's like $20 extra, or it's the same price and that tub is much bigger. I'm going to pick up that. So that is the one thing that you struggle with, because you don't want to give them an extra container, and I don't want to have extra plastics there, but that's what you're dealing with on a retail shelf. So it's a hard sell.
Yeah. I'm sure that partnership with Doug has been great. I've known Doug for a long time, like back in the old start of the USP Labs days when we met. So.
Oh no shit! I didn't know that. I was just speaking to him just before the call. Yeah, Doug's great. I'm flying out to Carolina next week. Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Oh right, you're really close to me.
Yes,
really
indeed.
Close. Got it. Yeah. Doug's a phenomenal guy. Love that fella. So I'll be training with him next week. So I better start carb loading now.
Yeah, that's right.
He's an animal, absolute animal.
Yeah. I can't believe the size of his guns, man. Those arms are phenomenal.
It's crazy. Yeah, like I'll be, for instance, we'll be at the Arnold or the Olympia, and there'll be like pro IFBB bodybuilders going up to him and going like, what the hell, dude? Like, they're just insane.
Well, tell Doug I said hi. So
I will do. I will do.
So speaking of, living in the moment and evolving, and we open this podcast talking about kind of being in the extremes, pushing the limits. How have you evolved over time personally, and where are you at now?
Yeah, so I was one of those people that definitely loved to kind of push the limits. I guess because I started racing motocross at such a young age, like 6 years. Yeah, 5 years old. 5 years old, I started racing. So you become addicted to that kind of adrenaline, and then you're just always trying to push it in everything that you do. So it's all or nothing characteristics. And what I'm still working on is trying to find the gray area in between, as opposed to the all or nothing, and realizing, for instance, I went mountain biking with my friend the other day. And when because he hadn't been biking for a while, I said, hey, there's a new trail here. Let's go out. And when we got to the bottom, he was like scared shitless. And he told my wife as well that, how much it scared him. And it didn't correlate to me, because I'm like, how can you get scared? I honestly don't understand. I really don't understand. And I think fear is not to be ignored. You can show your vulnerabilities, because the thing is, I would probably go down there and do it again, and maybe, I don't know, break something and tear something, and realize, okay, that's where the fear was coming from in retrospect. Because it doesn't, I have fear of other things. I hate little dogs. I have a fear of little dogs. You know what I mean? It's just different. But I think trying to find that gray area in between and being okay with it. So for instance, I could go on a ride and go, you know what? We're just going to go on a leisurely ride, and it's going to be boring, and you're not going to even touch a downhill or a jump or anything like that. And I think the same sort of thing in life. As I mentioned earlier, I spoke at a lot of events last year. I did 44 flights in the first quarter of this year. And now it's like, you know what? It's foot off the gas, even though I just bloody moved now. And it's still in the process of moving. It feels like the foot's on the gas. But just chill out a little bit. And there are opportunities that are to be had by going, let's go to the farmer's market. Let's just go for a swim, or whatever it is. I think that's the goal. And it's not a pipe dream, because I'm applying myself.
All right. So when the title of this podcast, Architect of Resilience. So let's talk about resilience at a deeper, kind of more philosophical level. But starting with, what was a time in your life where you were most challenged or tested, and how did you respond?
Yeah, so I'd say there's two answers to that. When I was living in India for a while, I was training some of these like Bollywood celebs over there. And that's when I got the mold toxicity, but I wasn't aware of it. I didn't know mold toxicity was a thing. And I was sleeping about 3 hours a night, maybe 4 on occasion. So, of course, that changed my personality. I was basically an arsehole. You couldn't stare at me for more than 3 seconds before I'd go off it, because I'm wondering, what are you looking at? What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? And but I still had I had too much resilience, because that mindset didn't make me fatigued, it made me angry, and I'd use that anger as energy. So I'd be like, I'm still going to outtrain you. I'm still going to outwork you. It was a very egotistical way through going through life, because I did have, I guess, because I wasn't aware, I was kind of naive to the fact that I just had too much of, I'm trying to think of the word, I can't think of the word, the resilience that wasn't doing me any good. I can't think of the word, I'll come back to it. So that was one aspect to it, that was a hard part of my life. Like if I wrote some books at that time, if I look at those books that I wrote now, I'm like, who wrote those? It's a completely different person. I'm glad that I got out of it. But the other part I'd say that was the hardest one for me was I was working here in Boise as the editor-in-chief of bodybuilding.com. I was working for Flex magazine previous to that. Came up, interviewed for the job. Ryan DeLuca at that time, this is back in end of 2006, needed somebody. I got the position. Great, I've got the dream job. I'm working now for the largest and fastest growing online resource in the world as an editor-in-chief. And I taught myself how to write through Merriam-Webster's book on journalistic writing. I taught myself photography with the help of a friend as well. So I'd really felt like I'd really made it through myself. As opposed to outside influence or teachers or anything like that told me that I couldn't do shit. But then the lawyer that I had not filed for my extension, my visa to be here. And the lawyers at bodybuilding.com were telling me, look, there's something odd going on with this guy. He's kind of extended this out too far. We're not getting the numbers that we require for blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so they investigated him to find out that he had not filed for this extension. So this was coming like a week before the Olympia, and I had to go down to the Olympia, obviously, to cover the event. We'd organized it all. And I was told, you need to get out of the country within 10 days, because otherwise, if you're further than a year over that extension, you'll be banned from the US for 10 years. However, if you get out now, there's a chance that we can work on a waiver and get you back in. So as soon as the Olympia was done, I got out of the country thinking, hey, I've got all the information. I got letters from Joe Weider, from Simon & Schuster, which is a publishing house that I'd worked with, and had all these letters from everybody, and obviously from the lawyers. And the amount of times that I went to immigration was 5 times, and you had to spend 6 months between each visit. So that's how long I was outside of the country. So I had to foreclose on my home here. My parents had to fly over and put all my stuff into storage. I had 2 investment properties, had to foreclose on that. And I'm looking at my dream life and my dream job just kind of wither away. And, luckily, Ryan DeLuca is very, very loyal and allowed me to keep my position remotely to a certain degree. But then amongst all of that, I managed to get a job opportunity working with celebs in India, which led to me having my gym franchise over there. But that was definitely the toughest part, because I felt that I wasn't in any control and there was no one could help me. And I found out that the people at immigration actually have more power than the president, because if they've had their coffee in the morning and they're in a good mood, they'll let you in. If not, they ain't letting you in. And I gave them pretty much the similar paperwork several years later to get back into the country than I did on that first visit. So that was really, really tough, because I am a bit of a control freak, and I had zero control, and that was very overwhelming at the time.
Architects, if you want to build more physical resilience in your life, you need to start with a firm foundation. That's why I only wear barefoot shoes. Their wide toe box, zero drop heel, and flexible frames allow me to comfortably strengthen my foot every day while promoting optimal body mechanics, postural alignment, and movement. Listeners can get 10% off by using the code RESILIENCE at barefoot.store. That's BEAR foot.store for 10% off with code RESILIENCE. Start improving how you move today with barefoot shoes. Yeah. I've got similar story from a family member, but not worth sharing. Thank you for sharing that. That is, not being in control is a hard thing, especially for a person that's a big driver. How would you define, what is your personal definition of strength?
Strength, kind of as I mentioned before, showing vulnerability at the right time, not too much of it, where you can be sympathetic to other people's needs, wants, and differences, because we do tend to think, well, if this person doesn't think like me, what's wrong with them? And I know life is all about certain compromises and you shouldn't compromise too much, but there should be something there. And I think a lot of us tend to speak more than we listen because we want to be heard. And I think that strength comes into listening before speaking and kind of having a little bit more patience. We live in a world today that is dominated by dopamine and drive and burning a candle at both ends, the kind of Gary V, sleeping is for the weak sort of thing. And I think we just need to be patient and be a little bit open to, everyone's indifferences to a certain degree. Like we think of strength as resilience, it's ego, it's, doing a 700-pound deadlift or whatever. It's not. Yes, that comes into play. I'm not saying that we should be coddled, but I think there is an opportunity to kind of slow down and listen. So I'd say that's more of a definition of strength. It's a balanced approach.
I really appreciate you sharing that perspective around that.
Yeah. Because, we didn't probably think like that 20 years ago, but over time, you evolve, you change. And I think we're kind of more narrow focused in our younger years.
Yep.
Well, I was definitely, but it's only now in, a lot of reflecting that I realize, okay, this is how it works. And obviously when you work with a lot of people that struggle, people that come to you for help, you get to understand. And, that's one thing that I love about what I do. What I learned in college for those 3 years in this industry is just a minuscule of what I've learned since.
Yeah. So how do you cultivate resilience in people that you mentor, especially people that are new to discomfort?
Yeah. A lot of people bloody hate me in the first few months of training. It all comes in different forms. So for instance, if people are on my VIP Plus program, they have access to my WhatsApp. So they have to send me videos all the time of them hitting their failure sets. Because 99% of these people are convinced that they train to failure, and 1% of them actually do. And I think that's why it's really good, to train with people every now and again who are just so much better to a certain degree at what, you're trying to achieve. So you can see, like I said, those opportunities and those ceilings, how high they really go, as opposed to the ones that you're living under. And so, I'll watch those videos and I'm like, honestly, we'll watch it again and tell me, if I had a gun to your head, would you have done 5 more reps? Or if I had a gun to your kid's head, would you have done 5 more reps? If the answer is yes, then you're not pushing your limits. You're not finding the failure. You're not giving that food that you're eating an opportunity to do you good based on the goals that you've given me. So that's going to be one aspect to it. Again, they have to write down what time they went to bed, send me their sleep scores or screenshot of their Oura ring or whatever. So that's going to be a form of resilience because they want to feel good. They want to get that dopamine. Maybe they feel like they want to get coddled by what they see online. So that's going to be another form of resilience, making sure you're putting that bloody phone down, waking up in the morning and you're not reactionary. It comes in so many different forms. And a lot of the time is if it's winter outside, if it's frigging cold and you've got an ice bath in your garden, you're getting in it. You're getting in it. You don't do the things that you want to do when you want to do them. You do them when you don't want to do. And over time, you may wonder why the hell you're doing it and you will question it, but that forms a certain form of subconscious resilience. So you just do it. You do it on automation as opposed to thought. Sometimes when you think, then okay, maybe this isn't good for me. I'll talk about motocross where you have to be quick, a very, very quick decision. If you're hitting a triple jump and it's kind of like a wall and you think about it now because fear is starting to set in as you get a little bit older, it's time to hang it up. or find something else to do, you know?
Yeah. Failure can be such an incredible growth tool. Like, obviously, being able to learn how to push to failure in the gym is what we're talking about here. But having failure in life also, I'm just, for me personally, like, is when I've grown the most. A year ago, I was still, owner of one of the largest, well-known brands in fitness. There was a lot of failure in the course of me not being an owner of that anymore, and some other things that happened in my life. But at the same time, I have grown so much as an individual, as a leader, as just in myself over the course of this period of time. It's, reflecting on that. And then also you think about seeing the parenting that happens today. Are you a parent, Kris?
I'm not.
No, yeah.
No, I'd be a very different parent to a lot of them around here.
But there's so much of this like coddling of the children, the overprotecting, and it's like those kids are never going to get to grow if they never get to experience failure. Like, failure is such an incredible growth mechanism.
Yeah, 100%. Like if I think back to my childhood, at times I hated my parents. I hated my dad. But now in retrospect, I'm like, God, I'm so glad that they inflicted discipline because I bloody deserved it in a lot of those instances. Because, God, I'd be a white knuckle ride by now otherwise. And I'm not saying you need to be an arsehole to your kids, but there needs to be a form of respect that comes through, the raising of children. Look, I'm not a parent. I'll never claim to have all the answers, but from the outsider's perspective, when I'm at airports and I just see kids going out of control and stuff, I'm like,
it wasn't a question on parenting, but so much around failure and what can the value of failure.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally relate to that. I got a similar story with a previous supplement company that I was involved with, and I was one of the co-founders, but there was 3 of us. So, of course, my vote and my thoughts were outvoted by 2 other people at that time. And, instead of, I walked from potentially millions of dollars. But in order for me to sleep at night, I had to realize that is a failure I don't want to deal with. I need to think of the future failures that I want in the future, but that are on my terms, as opposed to someone else's outside influence.
Yeah. Well, it seems to be a strange place to come to a close on a podcast talking about failure when we're talking about resilience. But this was a fun, engaging conversation today, Kris.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And the success a lot of the time comes from failure. So don't shy away from it. A lot of the time we don't understand it. We question it at the time. But I guarantee when you reflect back on it, you realize there was so many qualities that came from it.
Yeah. And I bring it up just, I there's so much to me in this presented social media world that we live in where people, I think, don't want to disclose failures, the lack of perfection and all those. And that is something that I try to wear out there because, guess what? Life's hard. We fail at times and, we get back up and we go at it again. And that is the whole intent, behind the podcast and series that I'm working around. It's like, how do you build resilience? We'll recognize and be real about life and we move through hard shit. And I think that is, I try to demonstrate that with my actions and the things I share and why I'm so open. It's not a woe is me or this or that, but just to be real about this stuff. This happens to everyone in life. And, how we deal with it is more important than what actually happened.
Totally agree with you 100%. And a lot of these people, if they'd put out their failures and their vulnerabilities, I think they'd be shocked at how many people would actually become more loyal to following their content because it's something that people relate to. They're not going to relate to all the successes and the Lamborghini that maybe they've rented for the pictures. And they're just not to. It's like, I'm sure God, what's his name? Who always calls out the people that Photoshops themselves.
Goob?
Goob.
Yep.
Yeah, I love Goob. He's freaking awesome. A lot of those people, though, that are Photoshopping themselves, they're not fat, they're not overweight. They're the people that we aspire to be. and they just don't want to show their imperfections. All they do is realize their own imperfections and try to hide them. They're doing the absolute opposite that would actually help them.
Yep. So true. So true. Well, is there anything else that last things you'd like to share or before we log off? And also, where can people find you? Which is a silly question. I know people, you're pretty easy to find. So, but let's drop all that out there.
Yeah, that's it. I was going to say, if anybody has any questions, they want to check me out, it's Kris or at Kris Gethin, Gethin. Hit me up on, I don't know, Instagram, anything like that. I'll answer your message.
Excellent. Well, thanks again for being so open and really great discussion we had today.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you very much.